This is Gene Bailey. He is a televangelist, a nutter butter of epic proportions, and he interviewed Donald Trump, of all people. So I wanted to listen to how this interview went. It is bound to get absolutely unhinged from reality. And while we listen to this, we're going to play some Pokemon Fire Red. It's actually a ROM hack called Ultraviolet where I can catch any Pokemon. So, yeah, let's listen to this interview with the Flashpoint people, this TV show owned and operated by Kenneth Copeland, where they interviewed Donald Trump.
It's my honor and privilege to be seated here in Mar-a-Lago with number 45, President Trump. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you for letting us sit down and talk. First off, I want to talk about your book, this new book, Letters to Trump.
Oh, I thought this was Donald Trump Jr.'s book. I didn't know that this was Donald Trump Sr.'s book. Okay. It's just a bunch of letters that people sent to him about how much they love him. Like, Obama wrote a whole book about his life and how he, like, struggled and succeeded, right? I don't know, like, a bunch of, like, Bill Clinton wrote a book, too, about his life, didn't he? And what does Donald Trump do? He writes a book containing pictures of tweets and pictures of people, and then he writes, like, little messages underneath. His coffee table book. He compiles letters people wrote to him. It's the most low-effort shit I've ever seen in my life, man.
Now, what struck me is I just got a chance to look at it ahead of time, and what was surprising to me was the wide variety of people that you know and you don't.
Rosie O'Donnell. Wow, fascinating. Okay. Donald Trump had a huge conflict with Rosie O'Donnell, so eventually Trump turned out to be a scumbag publicly, very publicly. And the people that, like, talked to him and liked him before, like Oprah endorsed Trump at one point. The people that liked him eventually realized he's a total scumbag and flipped. And they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with somebody that's like this. And I guess he included all of the letters from those people that he received. Interesting.
Don't they, in some of their letters, like Bob Hope was joking with you, you know, and some people that you wouldn't expect to see in a Donald Trump book, Hillary Clinton, some of the other folks that are in there. Right. It's a very interesting peek inside the public life, behind the curtain, peek behind the curtain. But I've got to know one question. What is your most favorite letter in the book?
Well, I have a lot of them. One of the letters is Billy Graham. You know Billy Graham better than anybody. And
oh, God. If you don't know Billy Graham, okay, his son is Franklin Graham. So Franklin Graham is the younger one, and he's actually old as sin now and still operating as a televangelist, I believe, and extremely influential in the evangelical world. Franklin Graham is. Well, Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell Sr. put a concerted effort into eroding the line between church and state. They wanted to take over the Republican Party to the best of their ability and largely succeeded. I mean, a lot of the Christian nationalism and extremism that you see today are a direct result of Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell Sr. trying to erode the line between separation of church and state back in the 70s and the 80s. So, yeah, Billy Graham is terrible. Terrible. I think he's dead now, but yeah, he's awful.
And he was one of the greats. And but I think maybe the Richard Nixon letters are interesting, a series of letters. But
hey, why didn't Donald Trump include the Jeffrey Epstein letters? Is there a reason I'm sure he got a ton of letters from Jeffrey Epstein, right? Is there a reason he didn't include those?
His wife watched me on a television show, Phil Donahue, which maybe you're too young to remember.
Yes, no, I'm not.
But Phil Donahue,
remember it well.
Yeah, Phil Donahue had a hot show, and I was on, and she said he should run for office or he should run for president. He'll win if he runs. And she was saying that to him quite a bit, and then he actually put it down in writing, something to that effect. And you know, he was an interesting guy, but we have a lot of interesting letters. Oprah Winfrey saying we should run for president together, president and vice president, nobody could beat us.
Oh, that was years and years and years ago. This is a long time ago when this happened. Like, this is long before Donald Trump turned out to be the scumbag that he is, basically. That, you know, he revealed himself to be a scumbag and hateful and bigoted. I mean, he was a Democrat for a long time, Trump was. And that's why anybody would have even suggested running with Oprah. Oprah wouldn't have run as a Republican, almost certainly, right? I mean, her spiritual advisor, Marianne Williamson, is running as a Democrat now. Oprah has always kind of leaned left and gotten into woo heavily, but she would never be okay with what Trump is doing right now.
She probably regrets saying that, but we have...
Yeah, and that's why he put it in the book, because she would have regretted saying that.
So many Rosie O'Donnell writing me letters, almost like these beautiful letters. But once you do what I do, much less so what you do, with you, people love. And with what I do, in order to make America great again, you have to be strong. But even before I gave policy, once you announce you're running as a Republican or perhaps as a Democrat, depending on which side you're on, you lose sort of half of your fan base.
Right.
What? Wait, is he saying when you run as a Republican or a Democrat, you lose half your fan base? I think that's what he's communicating, right? Like, people just, when they see that you're a scumbag, they don't want anything to do with you anymore? Well, yeah, of course. Is this a surprise to anybody else?
Your fan base.
Right.
And I understood that. And we did a really great job. We've had tremendous Christian support and, frankly, religious support, evangelical support.
Are evangelicals and Christians different? Why did he say they had a lot of Christian support and evangelical support?
We've had tremendous support from the faith community, which is a great thing today because bad things are happening.
That's right. Sure.
See, he's playing off of their fears. He's playing off of the idea that they believe that Satan is like pulling strings behind the scenes to make the evil. Blah, blah, blah. These people are QAnoners largely. They believe in QAnon ideas, even if they aren't outright open QAnoners. They accept a lot of the ideas presented by them. So, and that includes like a cabal behind the scenes, like running things or whatever. So Trump is playing off of that right now. Disgusting, dude. To emotionally manipulate people this way. Disgusting.
I want to ask you about, because this is, you've done a lot of interviews about the book, but I want to know, the people want to know more about you, Donald Trump, the man, the president.
Be careful.
Be careful. But
breaking news.
And what this does, it really gives us that first little glimpse.
Dude, what's he laughing about? They said they want to know more about you, and he says, "Be careful, breaking news, and then laughs. Why? I don't get it. What's the joke here? Look at this shit-eating grin on his face. I don't understand. Why is this happening?
But
breaking news.
And what this does, it really gives us that first little glimpse inside you. But you're, I was going back looking at some old, when I say old, like 5 years ago, speeches. Right. And in one of those, you said this line that...
Donald Trump didn't write his own speeches. I don't know if you needed to be told that or not. But yeah, somebody else wrote this. So what was the line, Gene, that somebody else wrote for Donald Trump to say?
Resonates with our audience. You said, we don't worship the government, we worship God.
That's right.
And you held up your Bible. Now, that's up to that point, I don't think I had ever seen in any president do that in that fashion. So I think a lot of
So he's saying that like Donald Trump made the country even more Christian extremist. I personally think that Donald Trump is an atheist. I don't think Trump believes in God for a second. But I think he absolutely uses, religion against people to accomplish his own interests and goals.
President do that in that fashion. So I think a lot of American conservative believers especially want to know, what was it like? Your faith is very important to you. You've said that.
No, it isn't. Honestly, I don't believe that he buys any of this stuff for a second. Not for 1 second.
Publicly, your faith is important. But what does that mean to the man, Donald Trump?
Well, I think it means a lot of things, but...
Oh, this is going to be interesting. He's going to give us an explanation. He's going to tell us why he's religious. This should be telling. It's like when somebody asked, what's your favorite Bible verse? Or your favorite Bible book or something. I don't remember what was asked. And he said, that's very personal. I don't want to talk about it. Can you name a Bible book? Is it like something that's in your repertoire? Are you capable of doing something like that? I would bet he's not capable of naming a Bible book. So let's see what his answer is here. He's certainly going to make some shit up, right?
But what does that mean to the man, Donald Trump?
Well, I think it means a lot of things, but more to perhaps your listeners and the people that
Right.
will watch this show, and it's a very large group of people.
What is? Oh, who cares? Why is he stroking this dude off? Like, I don't care if this guy has a large audience or not.
For instance, I was the only president ever go to the big rally they had in Washington,
Right.
which they have on a yearly basis, but I was the only one ever to go as a president, sitting president for life.
What does this have to do with what your faith means to you?
And people were shocked, but even Ronald Reagan didn't want to take that step. And it was very close, always very close, as you know, to the White House. It's almost like walking distance. But I went, and I was proud of that. And
I think he's talking about this religious event that he showed up at. And it was just some big religious nutcase event, like Christian nationalist event. And yeah, nobody would show up to these events because they're psychotic. Like, you're signaling that you're a far-right extremist. And far-right extremists can't win general elections in the U.S. That's why Republican presidents never did it. Because they understand, like, moderation, and they understand they have to win independence if they want to stay in office. That's the thing. Now, Donald Trump doesn't seem to, like, get that concept that he has to appeal to everybody to win an election. Yeah, of course he's going to win a primary. Absolutely. He's going to almost certainly win the Republican primary, hands down. But when it comes to going up against a Democratic candidate, independents are disgusted by the guy and what he says and doesn't believe and stands for. He has almost no chance. Now, Ron DeSantis decided to go far right also, and as a result is pulling through the floor because people already have their far right candidate. They don't care about Ron DeSantis because Trump is already an extremist and here for them, right? But DeSantis would have almost certainly won in the general. Like, he doesn't seem to understand how politics works at all.
it's almost like walking distance, but I went, and I was proud of that. And I think we've been given credit for doing that. But some people would say that was a courageous thing to do. I didn't view it as courageous. I viewed it as the right thing to do.
Well, I mean, the reason people said that it's courageous is because if you go to this, then your chances of winning the general election are through the floor. Nobody wants a religious extremist, or most people don't want a religious extremist as president.
But I was born into a family where my father was religious, my mother was religious.
I don't believe that for a second.
I wouldn't say they were, going to church every single day, but they were, they were believers and strong believers. I went to Sunday school, which was good and which was expected. It was like everybody goes to Sunday school. And when you think about it, the world is so different now. Sunday school is not probably on everybody's key list. But I remember in those days it was something that was very important. I remember it so well.
Dude, he's supposed to be telling us why his faith is important to him right now. What is he going on about?
Sit there and you'd learn all of the different, you'd go through the Bible basically. What's the greatest book? That blows this book away.
The greatest book that blows this book away. Wow. That's really interesting. Donald Trump famously said a while back, when asked what his favorite book was, he said, probably the Bible, maybe my book. The Bible's a close second or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. I should find that. Oh, check it out. He was apparently interviewed by the same guy that interviewed the KKK dude. That's interesting.
Who are your favorite authors?
Well, I have a number of favorite authors. I think Tom Wolfe is excellent.
Did you read Vanity of the Bonfires?
I did not.
It's a phenomenal book.
What book are you reading now?
Well, I'm
Bonfire of the Vanities.
I'm reading my own book again because I think it's so fantastic, Tom.
What's the best book you've read beside Art of the Deal?
I really like Tom Wolfe's last book, and I think he's a great author. He's done a beautiful job.
Which book?
His current book. His current book. It's just out.
Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yes. The man has done a very, very good job. And I really can't hear with this earphone, by the way.
Wow. Fascinating. That's really interesting, actually. I love it. He's very obviously full of it, right? Okay, check this out. So later on, Trump says, well, it's the Bible. My favorite book is the Bible, right? I mean, so he named his favorite book back in the 80s. His book. And the second book, he couldn't even name. He didn't know the name of the book that he was reading, apparently. And then later, when running for president, he says, my favorite book's the Bible.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into.
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's.
It's so stupid, dude. It's so stupid.
Do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible. The whole Bible is an incredible. I joke, very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time, but I just think the Bible is just something very special.
So stupid, dude. So fucking stupid. Oh my God. I got to get this clip.
Right.
The greatest book. That blows this book away. I have to be honest with you.
That's good. And
The Bible blows this book away, this book that he wrote. It's just ridiculous, dude.
glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, but so I grew up in that atmosphere, and I think that made it easier for me to do what I'm doing now. But I've been very, very pro, and not just Christianity, religion,
Right.
because
I don't understand why. I don't think, like, he doesn't care about Muslims. He doesn't care about Hindus. What does he mean by that?
pro, and not just Christianity, religion,
Right.
because it's being hit very hard. I will say this: Christianity, I believe, is being hit much harder than any other religion. It's incredible when you look at what's going on in Congress, and you see 15 years ago this would have been impossible to.
What?
And you see 15 years ago this would have been impossible to happen, but you see now they're
Like, what's he talking about right now? I don't understand.
very much discriminating against Christians in favor of certain other religions. And
What is he talking about? No, they're not. This is another KKK talking point, FYI. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Check this out. Just got to show you this interesting little thing. Southern whites are the Negroes' best friends, but no integration. And a boy in a Klan hood leans out a window, smiling boy in a Klan hood. I mean, that's not really connected to the point that I wanted to make, but that's something I wanted to show you guys. There is something else I wanted to show you. Give me a second. Here you go. Here you go. Right here. Boy leans out a window. It's the same boy I showed you a second ago. And then next to it is a picture of some white people holding a sign that says, "Where are white civil rights?" This was the narrative that was set up by the KKK back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even, into the 70s. Whites have rights. That's what this sign says here. They want you to believe that you are the persecuted one when you are the one doing the persecuting. Your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. You're not allowed to punch me in the face because that's not you exercising your rights. That's you violating my rights. So effectively what these white people were doing at the time by holding signs that say whites have rights are punching somebody in the face while saying, this guy is hitting my fist with his face. Somebody stop him. And that is what Donald Trump is saying right now. This is a propaganda technique that probably wasn't pioneered or created by the KKK, but heavily used by the KKK back in the civil rights days. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just, like, this guy is absolutely terrible in every way, and I just don't buy it. Unfortunately, these white Christians that he's talking about, these evangelicals that love Donald Trump and love Jesus and all that, would say 70 years old, the evangelicals that he's talking about that are using that that line of logic, Christians are being persecuted, are this little boy in this car. This picture is taken, what, 1955 maybe? 1960? Oh, maybe 1963? Who knows? He was a little boy in a car wearing a Klan hood fighting integration in 1960, we'll say. Now it's in the 2020s. So this little boy, say he's 5 years old in 1960, he'd be about 75, 80 years old, wouldn't he? The little boy who fought integration is the person that Donald Trump is talking about right now when he says Christians feel their rights are being taken away.
Discriminating against Christians in favor of certain other religions, and you know that very well. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is just another KKK talking point rebranded.
I think we have to change that around.
President Trump, when we think about religious liberty,
Well, he says we got to change that around. We have to persecute other religions in the name of Christianity, apparently. Okay.
Around.
President Trump, when we think about religious liberty, you were a champion of religious liberty. You talked about that, talked about the Johnson Amendment right from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
If you don't know the Johnson Amendment, it's the amendment in IRS tax code that basically says you're not allowed to specifically endorse or oppose specific political campaigns or candidates and retain tax-exempt status. That's all. Like, you're allowed to talk about absolutely anything you want except for specifically endorsing candidates for office. That's it.
Allowing churches and pastors, which we didn't really take advantage of what you did.
You didn't take advantage of because you were so used to not having that privilege.
Right.
But I was able to totally mute out and discredit and legally even get rid of, because we were never going to enforce it.
Right.
The Johnson Amendment, which said that pastors and reverends and people and priests and rabbis and others, but people that a lot of people like me respect and want to hear from, you weren't allowed to make any statements at all about politics or...
That's not true. They're perfectly allowed to talk about politics to their heart's content. They cannot specifically endorse political candidates from the pulpit. So Greg Locke cannot go up there and say, I want Donald Trump to be the president of the United States. I want you to vote for Donald Trump. He was not allowed to say that, or he'd lose tax-exempt status. Now, like Donald Trump said, effectively the Johnson Amendment is abolished because they're not enforcing it. Even now, they're not enforcing it under Joe Biden.
Certain other subjects. And I didn't even know that. I was at a meeting with 50 ministers, pastors, a couple of rabbis, a couple of other, and a couple of others, actually. It was incredible. I looked at this room and I said, you're the people that I really want to hear from, but I never hear from you politically. You never make your voice known. And I didn't know there was a Johnson Amendment at the time that really precluded them from doing that. And
so he's saying, so basically he told pastors, is what he's saying. He said to them, I want you to endorse me. And they said, we're not allowed to legally endorse you. And he said, oh, well, I'll fix that. As long as you agree to endorse me, then I'll just remove the Johnson Amendment. Or we won't enforce it against you. Is that what he's saying? He's describing corruption right now. This is corruption. Now, what if those same pastors wanted to endorse Joe Biden? Would he have done that anyways? Of course not. That's corruption.
I said, you have such power. You have more votes than women, and you have more votes than men, because you have more than 50%. So the women are 50, and the men are 50, and you're much more than that if you add it up as a power block. I said, so why aren't you using that power? And nobody wanted to sort of say, they're all looking at me like, this guy must be a novice. But I'm asking, why don't you use your power so that you can be treated better? And then one person said, well, we have the Johnson Amendment, which basically would take our tax exemption and our tax basis away from us, which is unbelievably severe, would put you out of business. I said, so that actually the people, and I was at the top of Trump Tower, way up high, and I looked down at the sidewalk and you see all the people. I said, so anybody off the street then you're saying has more power than the people in this room because they've silenced you.
That's right.
No, they don't, because those people have to pay taxes. This is a privilege to not pay taxes. This isn't something that just anybody gets. Now, if you don't want to pay taxes, you cannot endorse a political candidate. You can go all the way up to the line by saying you should vote for the guy that doesn't want people to be able to get abortions. You should vote for the guy that likes holding Bibles up when they take pictures. You should vote for the guy that, whatever, that stands for the values that I have endorsed this entire time. But coming out and saying that guy is Donald Trump means you have your tax-exempt status removed. That's it. That's as complex as it gets. There is so much leeway for religious extremists to do basically whatever they want. The Johnson Amendment is practically pointless anyways, and they still want to get rid of it.
And they sort of agreed. They said, well, and I ended that. I took that and I said, you're not going to do that. And we never enforced it. And we essentially ended it. In fact, I was going to put it very soon. I was going to put it into the new legislation for taxes and have it permanently ended. But we essentially ended it. And then we had a very, unfortunately, we had a horrible election. Horrible, just horrible what happened, like a third world.
Talking about 2020, I assume. No, the 2020 election was actually the most secure election ever. It was as secure as it gets because everybody involved knew Trump was going to be doing this. He was going to claim fraud. He was claiming fraud before the election happened, months before. So everybody was extremely careful all the way through the election.
World country. We had a third world country election. And bad things happened, and I wasn't able to finish it, but I'll finish it this time. But the Johnson Amendment's a terrible thing because the people I want to hear from are essentially not allowed to speak. I want to hear from you.
Right.
And,
nonsense.
And you really can't say what you want to say. But during my term...
No, he can say anything he wants. He just cannot specifically and explicitly and openly endorse a political candidate. That's it.
They were allowed to do it. Not everybody believed it. Not everybody did it because I think they were almost programmed not to do it. But they were getting more and more so. It was very important.
You're right. They were programmed.
They were programmed. That's true. They were so used to the other.
Right.
What showed you the power of Lyndon Johnson, he had a minister, I believe, in Dallas.
That's right.
Who he absolutely disliked, and they had a tremendous war going on. And
dude, what does this have to do with anything? Is this even true? I find it fascinating that Trump comes up with these little fun facts about, Lyndon B. Johnson or these presidents or whatever. He was probably, informed about this stuff before. Look, here are 5 little fun facts about Christianity that you can fit into your conversation with this guy somewhere. And they gave him a list of little fun facts. That's my guess about what happened.
He didn't like what this man was saying about him, and he literally put this Johnson Amendment out and got it passed, which basically said people aren't allowed to speak about politics if you happen to be...
That's not what the Johnson Amendment is.
Christian or anything else. You're not allowed to speak. And that was called the Johnson Amendment, which was a very powerful thing. It showed you...
This applies, to my knowledge, to any any tax-exempt organization. You're not legally allowed as a tax-exempt organization to explicitly endorse or oppose any political candidate. That's as far as it goes. American Atheists stands for LGBT rights and separation of church and state and all kinds of other stuff. And as a tax-exempt organization, to my knowledge, they're not allowed to explicitly endorse or oppose any political candidate. But they're still allowed to take these positions on these political issues.
The power of Lyndon Johnson to be able to get that done, but we took it away.
Wow, I guess that was the end of the interview. Absolutely unhinged from reality, dude. Everything about it. That was nuts. I think they said that they split this into 2 parts, so there's probably more to this. But let's keep listening here.
All right, Pastor Hank, what did you think of part 1 of President Trump? He spent quite a bit of time talking about the Johnson Amendment. I want to get Lance's take on that. But as a pastor, you understand the what pastors across America that want to stand up, their hesitation because of their 501c3. Do you believe that still is as big a deal now?
Well, I think it needs to be a big deal. And first, I just want to say this, Pastor Gene, what an honor it is to watch you interview President Trump. And what an honor that God gave you, and also to the Flashpoint Army. So thank you for making yourself available. But as a pastor, something that we have to remember, and when Jesus, we often talk about, the return of our Lord. Well, his first appearing, the shepherds that were chosen by God were the ones that were watching over their flocks by night. And my responsibility is not to ignore the darkness, the evil, but actually watch over my flock. And so what I appreciated about what President Trump did for us is empowered shepherds to speak boldly and say, hey, this is dark. This is what darkness looks like. This is the special interest groups and what they're trying to do to destroy our country. This is the true definition of traditional marriage. This is what God...
You're perfectly allowed to say all of that. This entire time, there's nothing that has ever prevented you from saying that at any point, even after the Johnson Amendment.
God said is man and woman, and we don't alter it. And also we need to be able to address and say, look, there are evils that are coming through our government. That's why I think
you've never been prevented from saying that, ever.
Thank God for people like Lance Wallnau, who is absolutely doing something that is so needed. And that's why you need to get to Nashville, especially for one of the talks. And what Lance did is show the importance to the pastors, to the evangelicals, and to the religious community, how you cannot just stay in the four walls of your church, or pastors be cowards that are afraid to say anything. We have the ability now to speak boldly, and we should. And I want to say this last thing. When Jesus asked his disciples, who do men say that I am? It's amazing who they compared Jesus to out on the streets. They said, oh, some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptist. By the way, Elijah and John the Baptist both were nonconformists, and they also had a voice into the political realm. And so should we.
I don't understand the point that he's getting at. You're allowed to say all of this.
If we are ever going to bring the reform that God desires and rescues a nation that desperately needs the voice of righteousness and moral code.
Yeah, I agreed, and thank you for your comments. Lance, when he talks about the Johnson Amendment, the thing that seems to me, I talked to a lot of people, of course, people are just talking right now, but I believe there's a remnant of pastors that are saying, you know what?
The remnant is a reference to a Bible verse. It talks about the remnant in the end days, the remnant of the church or whatever is going to come in and do all this stuff and bring about the end or something.
Take away my 501c3 if that's where this goes. I'm still going to stand up for the right thing. Now, obviously,
great, fine, that's all we want. Go ahead.
My 501c3 if that's where this goes. I'm still going to stand up for the right thing. Now, obviously, not everybody's there, but there is more of that than in America than we have ever seen before, of the willingness not to cave into some government directive, the Johnson Amendment. What do you think, Lance?
Well, listen, we prize unity, don't we? We talk about unity, we speak about unity, but God himself says that it must necessarily at times happen that there's divisions among you, that those that are approved can be made manifest. We're in a time in America now where the waffly pastor, the political pastor, the nervous pastor, the uncommitted pastor, the compromised pastor is being separated from the courageous and clear-headed pastor. And so the division is working out really well, because I think the flock needs to be under the administration of a shepherd that is telling the truth and dealing with the devil head on and not obliquely. So what...
Dude, I don't know what any of that means.
Donald Trump is as painful as it is for American Christians. He is God's way of throwing the gauntlet down and saying, I'm not going to worry about if this offends your religious spirit, and you're going to have to choose what you believe is right and wrong, because this election is so clearly delineation between two different worldviews that are darkness and light contrasted. But I got to tell you, the Johnson Amendment is something which the pastors don't really celebrate having repealed, because they'd have to have an opinion. They hide behind it.
They don't have to have an opinion. It's not requiring people to have an opinion. What are you talking about?
Trump Towers, by the way, at that meeting where he mentions about he was in Trump Towers. I was in that meeting, and he was talking about the man on the street on a soapbox has more authority than the clergy in the United States because he can say whatever he wants.
Because he's paying taxes. The clergy is allowed to pay taxes and have an opinion on this stuff too, publicly. What's he talking about? This is nonsense.
He said, you guys can't. And he believes that Christians in the pulpit should be reformers in the nation, not just commentators in the Bible.
That's so true. In fact, that's our heritage of reformers, pastors that are reformers. The first one that comes to mind is Peter Muhlenberg, right there in 1776, what he did, the Black Robe Regiment. All right, so Pastor Mark Burns, President Trump made a comment there. He said, Christianity...
The Black Robe Regiment mentioned there that he did there is a call to a new revolution. They're basically calling for a 1776 thing where you overthrow the government. That's what they're calling for. They say, we want to be the Black Robe Regiment, which was apparently a group of pastors who, called to their people to go fight in the Revolutionary War, basically.
Pastor Mark Burns, President Trump made a comment there. He said, Christianity is, I think, one of the most, along the lines of it's hit the hardest, it's the most discriminated against religion in the world right now.
Give me a break. This is insane.
And in America right now. Do you agree with that?
Trump invited a bunch of extremists to talk to him about what it would take for them to endorse him. And they said, you have to remove the Johnson Amendment. And he said, okay, well, I'm just not going to enforce it anymore. That's pure, unadulterated corruption, isn't it? Is it just me? Is that corruption?
Like Lance, I was in that very same meeting when President Trump declared that the guy at the soapbox had more power than we because of the Johnson Amendment. And I remember as he was talking, he began to talk about how Christianity is under attack. And remember, at that time, I was a self-declared Democrat because that's what we as Black people in America, we do. We vote Democrat. So without really knowing the difference of the politics, when I began to hear Donald Trump speak for the very first time
well, he's acting as though he's forced into this position. The thing is, during the civil rights battle, we had kids like this boy right here leaning out a car, says Southern whites are the Negro's best friends, but no integration. Wearing a Klan hood. Do you know the political ideology of the Ku Klux Klan? Conservatism. They were conservatives. They wanted to retain traditional values. They had this idea in their head that black people were supposed to stay separate from white people. That was the traditional way. And they do anything to retain that. They do anything to keep it the way that it was. Now, today, Republicans are the conservative party. Republicans of today are this child in the 1960s. It's about the right age. This kid would be about 75 years old today, and he would be watching Flashpoint. Would you be surprised to find that the kids in the Ku Klux Klan were also ultra-nationalist Christians? It's all the same. It's all the same, group of people, same belief system, same everything. So when he says black people are supposed to vote Democrat, yeah, that's because the Republicans were the people wearing Klan hoods when it was more socially acceptable to do so. By voting Republican, by endorsing Republican ideals, by talking about conservative values, you are repeating Ku Klux Klan talking points. Now, I don't know what else to call that but an Uncle Tom. How else is this supposed to be framed? How else am I supposed to interpret this? Of course, you're not supposed to vote for the party of the Ku Klux Klan. Of course, you're not supposed to endorse Ku Klux Klan ideas. Yes, that's correct. You're supposed to vote against the Ku Klux Klan. Absolutely. You know what's disgusting, really, truly disgusting about this? How old is this guy, you think? 40? 50? He was around about the time that the Klan was terrorizing people. And he's in South Carolina. He was a child when the Klan was, terrorizing people. His grandparents were very possibly slaves. depending on how old he is and where he's from and stuff like that, it's likely that one of his grandparents or even great-grandparents was a slave. And he's repeating Ku Klux Klan talking points. That is depraved shit. Did that blood money buy you anything, like, worth it? Did that blood money you got from endorsing Ku Klux Klan talking points and selling out your brothers and sisters, is that blood money worth it to you? I hope so.
Very first time at Trump Towers, way back in 2015, and he's beginning to talk about abortion, begin to talk about how Christianity is under attack, how it's easier for other religions to come to America, but more difficult for Christians who are trying to escape tyranny to come to America. The government makes it very difficult for Christians across the board, and how prayer has been taken out of the schools and how our voices are being challenged. We can't even say Merry Christmas. These things.
You are perfectly free to say Merry Christmas. Always have been. Nothing ever stopping you from doing that.
He was saying that day, and I remember, Gene, as I was sitting there listening to him, I remember saying to myself, I think I might be a Republican. I think that I actually might be a Republican because...
You think that you're ready now to endorse Ku Klux Klan talking points? Okay. I wonder how this guy got to this point. In all seriousness, I don't believe any of his story. I wonder how this black guy, whose grandparents were likely slaves because he lives in the South, who were probably born into slavery, I wonder how he justifies voting for the party of the Ku Klux Klan.
For me, I vote the Bible.
Right.
And for every believer that is watching this broadcast, to me, it's very difficult that you may be a Democrat in today's time based off the policies of Democrats today that have clearly drawn the line. They are clearly attacking the body of Christ. They are clearly attacking what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, God's perfect creation.
Like, all of this completely made up. Like, I don't even know what the dude's talking about right now.
And they're destroying that by introducing the transgender agenda, which is a false, evil religion.
Oh, yeah, he really doesn't like trans people. That's like his whole bit. Like, that's what he talks about constantly is trans people.
That is designed to destroy the minds of our children. And why the body of Christ is remaining silent in many cases, you're right, Gene. There is a remnant of pastors that are vocally declaring, for God I live and for God I die. Though you slay me, yet still will I trust you. That you can take my 501c3, you can take my nonprofit status, because the joy that I have, God gave it, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away.
Like, they're acting persecuted because they are having a privilege removed if they talk about this stuff. This isn't even happening. This isn't even a problem that exists in society. They're not even losing that privilege. They're just complaining about losing that privilege.
And so what President Trump is saying, I believe without a shadow of a doubt that this man is under the demonic attacks because, as I said to him personally, I said, President Trump, when I was in the Rose Garden and he signed that executive order blocking the Johnson Amendment, I said to him, Mr. Trump, President Trump, God has positioned you to position the church to carry out the Great Commission in modern day history. And I pray that moving forward, the church really gets behind being vocal from the pulpit, not so much pushing a candidate, but talk about the evil policies that are contrary to the word of God.
Wait a minute. So he says, hang on, listen to this one more time.
Candidate being vocal from the pulpit, not so much pushing a candidate.
That's the Johnson Amendment. Are you kidding me? That's what that is. If you don't care if people endorse a candidate, then why do you care about the Johnson Amendment? This dude has no idea what he's even talking about, seemingly.
But talk about the evil policies that are contrary to the word of God.
There's nothing ever barred about that. You're always allowed to do that.
They come from Democrats or Republicans, vote the Bible.
Amen. Amen. Vote the Bible indeed. And here's what the quote, I want to make sure I got it right. He said, Christianity, I believe, is being hit much harder than any other religion. True words. All right, listen.
No, they're not true words. That's absurd.
That's just the small part. We got a much larger, the second half of this is much longer. A lot of good stuff. We're going to get into some politics and government and his view on some things. You know what was interesting here, before I go to the break, I was sitting there and I almost forgot this man has been indicted. He's got all of these issues that he's dealing with. But as you can tell, he was having a good time. He walked in. He was very confident. It was a very different President Trump than the last time we talked. So it's very interesting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We come back, part 2 of President Trump and you, the interview you want to see. Don't go away.
This is just disgusting, dude. This is disgusting on so many levels. And yeah, I guess they're going to be doing like a part 2 with Donald Trump in just a minute. That's fascinating, though. Part 1 was actually kind of interesting. I was interested by it. I don't know. Let me know what you think about it in the comments.